What happens when the world's most powerful military stops asking for permission and starts rewriting the rules of power in real time? Iran is now facing a wall of force so complete, so precise, and so relentless that surrender is no longer a choice made in panic, but a cold calculation written in steel and silence. If you want to understand why the balance of the Middle East just shattered, hit the like button now, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who still thinks old rules protect weak regimes. The air over the Persian Gulf does not lie. It carries the sound of engines that never sleep. Carrier groups moved into position not as a warning, but as a statement. This is not diplomacy wearing a uniform. This is strategy made visible. For decades, Iran built its power on a simple idea: make the cost of attack unbearable. Use the Strait of Hormuz as a chokehold. Arm proxies who fight in shadows. Delay negotiations until the world loses patience. That idea worked because American resolve was always questionable. Leaders changed. Public opinion wavered. Elections brought new priorities. But something shifted. The military posture did not come with a speech. It came with fuel, with missiles, with satellites that see through darkness. Look at the map. The deployment was not random, it was layered. Air defense networks were not just activated, they were integrated. Cyber operations did not wait for declarations of conflict. They began quietly, disrupting communications that Iran trusted. Intelligence assets that had been quiet for years suddenly spoke. The message was not sent through an embassy. It was delivered through capability. When you can strike any target within minutes, and the enemy knows it, the psychology changes before the first bomb falls. Iran's military leaders understand this. They are not fools. They see the carrier strike groups. They see the stealth aircraft positioned within reach. They see the alliance networks that have been rebuilt with silent efficiency. The old strategy of asymmetric response depends on uncertainty. If Iran strikes a ship, does America respond with overwhelming force or a measured reply? That uncertainty protected them. It allowed escalation without consequence. But now, the response framework is already built. The alliances are locked. The weapons are loaded. The uncertainty is gone. And without uncertainty, asymmetry dies. This is the heart of the matter. The United States did not just send ships. It rebuilt an architecture of inevitability. Every move Iran considers now passes through a filter of guaranteed retaliation. Not maybe, not possibly. Guaranteed. That filter breaks decision-making. It turns bold leaders into cautious accountants. They start counting costs that have no ceiling. They look at their oil infrastructure, fragile and exposed. They look at their nuclear facilities, now within the crosshairs of weapons designed to reach them without warning. They look at their capital and they imagine what happens when precision replaces propaganda. But this is not just about hardware. It is about isolation. Iran's regional influence was always its shield. Hezbollah in Lebanon, militia groups in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza. These were not just allies. They were buffers. They absorbed pressure before it reached Tehran. Over the past months, those buffers have been crushed, weakened, or pushed into irrelevance. The supply lines that fed them have been cut. The funding that sustained them has dried up under sanctions stronger than any before. Iran is not fighting one enemy now. It is fighting the reality that its empire of influence was always thinner than it appeared. Inside Iran, the pressure is worse. The economy is not struggling, it is suffocating. The currency has collapsed beyond repair. Young people, who make up the majority of the population, have lost faith. They do not believe in the revolutionary promise. They see the regime spending resources on foreign wars, while their own lives shrink. Protests have not disappeared. They have simply been pushed underground, waiting for a crack. And that crack is widening. The regime knows it. They see the same intelligence reports. They understand that holding power through force becomes impossible when the people no longer fear the force enough to stay silent. This is where surrender becomes inevitable, not the dramatic surrender of a defeated army on a battlefield. The quiet surrender of a regime that realizes the cost of continuing exceeds the cost of changing course. It starts with concessions hidden in diplomacy. It continues with pauses in nuclear development that were once unthinkable. It ends with a government that accepts terms it would have rejected with contempt just years ago. That is not weakness in the moral sense. It is realism in the strategic sense. And realism, when pushed by overwhelming power, always wins. We have seen this pattern before. Not in the same place, not with the same actors, but in the same shape. A great power decides that patience is over. It builds a coalition that looks unstoppable. It applies pressure, not in one dramatic blow, but in a constant weight that never lifts. The target regime spends months denying the reality. Then it spends months negotiating for time. Then it accepts what it once called impossible. The timeline is not years. It is months, sometimes weeks. The speed depends not on the strength of the enemy's will, but on the enemy's belief that resistance is still possible. For Iran, that belief is fading. The military intelligence is clear. The American posture is not temporary. This is not a fleet sent for a weekend exercise. These are assets positioned for permanence. The message to Tehran is simple. We are here, we are not leaving, and every day you wait, the cost grows. That message reaches not just the generals, but the businessmen, the clerics, the families of the elite. They all start asking the same question. Is pride worth destruction? The answer, in private rooms where real decisions happen, is already changing. Now, pause for a moment. If you are still with me, it means you understand that history is not made by speeches. It is made by pressure that never stops. Before we go deeper into exactly how this pressure is engineered, I want you to do something quick. Press subscribe right now, hit the notification bell, drop a quick comment saying power shift if this is clicking for you, and share this with one person who needs to see that the world is not static. It moves, and right now it is moving fast. The engineering of this pressure is worth understanding because it reveals why surrender is not just likely, but structurally inevitable. Start with air dominance. The United States does not just have more planes. It has a system. Satellites feed data to command centers in real time. Fighter jets share information without speaking. Missile defense networks cover the region like a shield that closes every gap. For Iran to launch anything meaningful, it must first survive detection, then survive interception, then survive retaliation. Each step is now nearly certain. The risk calculation changes completely. Before, Iran could gamble that some missiles might slip through. Now, they must assume every action is seen, every response is prepared, and every consequence is magnified. Then consider the naval presence. The Strait of Hormuz is Iran's favorite threat. They talk about closing it. They drill for it. They build small boats and missiles to make it dangerous. But closing a strait is not an event. It is a process. And during that process, the attacker becomes the target. The American Navy has spent decades planning for exactly this scenario. They do not need to win a long war. They need to open the strait in days. The economic impact of a brief closure is devastating, but the military impact on Iran's small craft and coastal defenses is absolute. They know this. They have always known this. That is why they never actually closed it. They used it as a threat because the threat was more valuable than the act. But now, the threat has lost its power because the response is guaranteed and swift. Cyber warfare adds another layer. We do not see it, but Iran feels it. Their banking systems are fragile. Their power grids have been mapped. Their military communications rely on technology that can be disrupted without a single bullet. In a conflict that began quietly, the lights could go out in strategic locations. The command centers could lose contact with their forces. The propaganda channels could go dark. This is not science fiction. It is the modern reality of state-level conflict. And Iran's defenses in this space are weak. They have hackers, yes. They have some digital capabilities. But they do not have the infrastructure to defend against a sustained professional cyber assault backed by global intelligence. Now think about the economic weapon. Sanctions are not new. Iran has lived with them. But the current framework is different. It targets the hidden networks that allowed Iran to survive previous rounds. The shipping companies that moved oil secretly, the banks in third countries that processed payments, the front companies that bought technology. These networks are being exposed and destroyed one by one. The result is not just poverty, it is paralysis. The regime cannot pay its loyalists. It cannot fund its projects. It cannot maintain the illusion of strength. Money is the blood of power. When the blood stops, the body weakens. Inside the country, this weakness shows. The protests of recent years were not isolated events. They were signals. Signals that the young do not believe. Signals that the middle class is exhausted. Signals that even some within the security forces are questioning whether the cost of loyalty is too high. The regime responds with arrests, with violence, with propaganda. But these responses treat symptoms, not causes. The cause is a government that promised greatness and delivered isolation. The cause is a system that spends on missiles while children go hungry. The cause is a leadership that sees the world turning away and has no answer except more force. That force, however, is now directed inward. When a regime turns its weapons on its own people, it loses the last claim to legitimacy. It becomes an occupation force in its own country. And occupation forces, no matter how brutal, always lose eventually. They win days, they win weeks, but they lose the years. Iran's leaders understand this timeline. They are not stupid, they are trapped. They want to survive, but survival now requires change. And change, in their view, means surrender. This is the psychological trap that the American strategy has built. It does not just threaten destruction, it threatens irrelevance. It says you can keep your pride, but you will have nothing else. Or you can surrender your pride and you might keep something. That is a terrible choice for any leader, but it is a choice that must be made, and it must be made quickly, because every day of delay makes the final terms worse. We have reached a critical point in understanding this. Before we examine what surrender actually looks like in practice and why it will come faster than anyone expects, take a moment. If this analysis is giving you clarity you are not getting from mainstream news, subscribe now, not later, now. This channel does not do shallow takes. We go deep, we stay truthful, we connect the dots. Hit share with someone who thinks they understand geopolitics but needs to see the engine underneath. And stay with me, because the next part explains the timeline that everyone is missing. The timeline is the secret that changes everything. Most people think these conflicts unfold over years. They imagine long wars, slow negotiations, gradual shifts. But modern military pressure does not work that way. It works in windows. There's a window where the pressure is new and the target is still adjusting. Then there's a window where the pressure becomes normal and the target starts adapting. Then there's a final window where adaptation fails and collapse begins. The key for the United States is to close the first two windows quickly and open the third before Iran can respond. This has already happened. The initial shock of the military deployment was meant to freeze decision-making. It worked. The integration of allies was meant to prevent Iran from finding partners. It worked. The economic strikes were meant to cut funding before Iran could move assets. They worked. Now we are entering the third phase. The phase where Iran must choose, adapt to a permanent state of weakness, or surrender to change the conditions of that weakness. Adaptation requires resources Iran does not have. Surrender requires courage they do not feel. But reality does not care about courage. It cares about arithmetic. The arithmetic is simple. The American military can maintain this posture indefinitely. The cost is high, yes, but it is sustainable. The American economy can absorb it. The political will, once committed, is hard to reverse because reversing looks like defeat. For Iran, maintaining resistance is not sustainable. Every day of tension drains resources. Every week of isolation deepens economic wounds. Every month of proxy weakness reduces strategic options. The arithmetic is not fair. It is not meant to be fair. It is meant to be decisive. This is why surrender is inevitable. Not because Iran is weak in spirit, not because its soldiers are cowards, but because the equation has been solved. The variables are fixed. The outcome is known. All that remains is the moment when someone in Tehran admits it out loud. That moment is closer than it appears. The signs are already visible for those who know where to look. The diplomatic language has softened. The nuclear rhetoric has become cautious. The regional actions have slowed. These are not random changes. They are the first steps of surrender, disguised as strategy. But disguise does not last. The world will see it clearly when the formal terms appear. They will not look like defeat. They will look like peace. They will be called agreements. They will be celebrated as breakthroughs. But those who understand power will see them for what they are. The acceptance of reality by a regime that finally ran out of options. And that acceptance will change everything. The Middle East will not be the same. The energy markets will stabilize under new rules. The alliances will shift. The old order, built on fear and balance, will be replaced by a new order built on certainty and strength. That is the future being written right now, not with speeches, but with ships, with satellites, with silence where noise used to be. We need to talk about the invisible war. The one that does not make headlines because it has no explosions you can film. This war is fought in server rooms and fiber optic cables. It is fought in the code that runs Iran's banking system, its electrical grid, its military communication networks. The United States has spent years preparing these weapons. They are not theoretical. They have been tested in smaller conflicts. They work. And now they are active in a sustained campaign that Iran cannot see coming until it is already happening. Imagine a command center in Iran. The generals are gathered. They are discussing a response. Suddenly their screens go dark. Not all of them, just the ones that matter. The ones connected to the air defense network. The ones tracking American ships. The ones coordinating with proxies. For 30 minutes, they are blind. They do not know if this is a test. They do not know if this is the beginning of an attack. They do not know if their messages are reaching their forces. That uncertainty is not an accident. It is a weapon. It teaches them that their own systems are not safe. It teaches them that the enemy is already inside. And without money, loyalty dies. The Revolutionary Guard is not just an army. It is an economic empire. It controls construction, energy, smuggling, and trade. Its leaders live well. Their families live well. But that welfare depends on cash flow. When the cash stops, the loyalty becomes expensive. When the loyalty becomes expensive, the regime must choose between paying its defenders and feeding its people. It always chooses the defenders, which makes the people angrier, which requires more defenders, which costs more money. That is a death spiral. Iran is in it now. The internal situation is worse than any satellite image can show. There is a generation that does not remember the revolution. They do not remember the promises. They only see the failure. They see a government that kills young women for wearing clothes wrong. They see a government that spends billions on foreign wars while their own universities close. They see a government that blames everyone except itself. This generation is not organizing in the open. They are organizing in whispers. They're organizing in apps that disappear. They're organizing in the silence between protests, waiting for the moment when the security forces hesitate. That hesitation is already happening. There are reports, verified by independent observers, that some units within the security apparatus have refused orders. Not in large numbers, not yet. But the cracks are there. Every soldier who dies for a cause he does not believe in makes the next soldier think harder. Every family that loses a child to a protest bullet asks why the government is fighting its own people instead of its real enemies. These questions do not have answers that satisfy. They only have answers that delay. And delay in this environment is the same as surrender. The regime knows this. They are not blind. They read the same reports. They understand that holding power through fear requires the people to be more afraid of the government than they are of change. That balance is broken. The fear is still there. Yes, the prisons are full. The executions continue. But fear is no longer enough. It has become a background noise. The people have adapted to it. They have learned to live with it. And once people learn to live with fear, the government loses its power to control them through fear alone. This is where the American strategy becomes brilliant in its cruelty. It does not try to inspire a revolution. Revolutions are messy. They are unpredictable. They can produce worse outcomes. Instead, the strategy applies pressure that forces the regime to change from within or collapse from within. It makes the status quo unbearable. It makes resistance more dangerous than reform. It makes surrender the only rational option for those who want to survive with some dignity intact. We have seen this psychological process before, not in Iran, but in other regimes that faced similar walls. The leaders start with denial. They say the pressure is temporary. They say their people are loyal. They say the enemy is weak. Then comes the anger. They blame foreign conspiracies. They arrest more people. They make more speeches. Then comes the bargaining. They send secret messages through intermediaries. They offer partial concessions. They ask for time. Then comes the depression in the political sense, the acceptance that the old world is gone. And finally, the surrender, dressed as a strategic decision made for the good of the people, necessary for peace. Iran is currently moving from anger to bargaining. The language has changed. The threats have softened. The nuclear program, once described as non-negotiable, is now described as flexible under the right conditions. The regional actions have slowed because the resources are needed at home. These are not strategic choices made from strength. They are survival instincts made from weakness. And survival instincts, when pushed long enough, always lead to the same door. That door is now open. The terms are being prepared in rooms where diplomats speak in careful words. The terms will not be called surrender. They will be called a framework, a new agreement, a regional security arrangement. But the substance will be clear. Iran accepts limits it once rejected, stops actions it once pursued, and allows inspections it once banned. That is surrender in everything but name. And it is coming. If this makes sense so far, and if you see the pattern clearly now, I need you to do something specific. Drop a comment right now with the word calculation. If you understand that Iran's surrender is not emotional but mathematical. Subscribe to this channel if you want analysis that treats you like an adult, not like someone who needs cartoons. And share this video with your group chat, your family, anyone who is tired of surface-level news. We are not here for noise. We are here for truth. Hit that like button too, because the algorithm needs to know that people want depth, not distraction. The timeline for this surrender is not years, it is months. The military posture is not temporary. The economic pressure is not easing. The internal unrest is not disappearing. Each factor reinforces the others. The military presence makes economic sanctions more effective by preventing Iran from finding alternative partners. The economic collapse makes the internal unrest more dangerous by removing the regime's ability to buy loyalty. The internal unrest makes the military position more dangerous by reducing Iran's willingness to risk conflict. This is a feedback loop that accelerates. It does not slow down. It does not stabilize. It drives toward a single outcome. Some people will say this is too optimistic. They will say Iran is resilient. They will say the regime has survived worse. They are not wrong about the past. Iran has survived. It survived the Iran-Iraq war. It survived waves of sanctions. It survived protests before. But survival is not the same as victory. And this time is different because the pressure is not coming from one direction. It is coming from all directions at once. That is the definition of inevitability. Others will say the United States will not stay the course. They will say politics will change. Elections will come. New leaders will seek different priorities. This is a real risk, but it is a risk that actually helps the American strategy. The uncertainty that usually protects Iran is gone precisely because the posture is now institutional, not personal. Let us talk about the allies, because they are the silent partners in this inevitability. Saudi Arabia, once cautious, now sees the shift and positions itself closer to American strategy. The United Arab Emirates continues its careful balancing, but knows that a weakened Iran means a stronger Gulf. Israel, long the primary opponent of Iranian expansion, now operates with greater freedom because the American umbrella is not just present but active. These allies do not just support the American posture, they amplify it. They provide bases, they share intelligence, they coordinate airspace. They make the region transparent to American power and opaque to Iranian movement. This alliance network is not a formal treaty. It is a practical reality built on shared fear of Iranian dominance and shared interest in American protection. That reality is now mature. It has been tested by conflict. It has survived political changes. It is durable. And durability is what Iran lacks. Iran's alliances are based on shared enemies and shared ideologies, not shared prosperity. When the money stops, the allies drift. When the weapons fail, the allies hide. Iran is learning that its network of influence was never as deep as its propaganda claimed. The world is not ending. It is changing. And in that change, there's a strange kind of hope. Not the hope of easy answers, but the hope of clear reality. When reality is clear, action becomes possible. And action, guided by wisdom, can turn even the most stubborn conflicts toward peace. Iran's surrender is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a different one. Watch for it. Understand it. Be part of the world that sees it clearly. Thank you. Stay sharp. Stay curious. The next move is already being made.